Dave, with the heavy breathing, it looks like you're getting ready for the Super Bowl. You're playing?
This is the Super Bowl.
This is the Super Bowl. Okay. All righty.
Gonna win. Yes, hurrah.
Okay. This week's Parsha is Parshat Mishpatim. Mishpatim has, it's found in chapter 21, verse 1 through chapter 24, verse 18, has 118 verses in it. There's a total of 53 commandments. That's a lot. That's almost 10% of the 613 commandments. On the back of the first page of the Parsha Facts, it has a whole list of what the mitzvahs are based upon the Sefer HaChinuch. Those of you that are out of town can get a printout of it. When we send out the video of this class, there's a place to click for the Parsha Facts, so you can get that as well. 23 positive commandments, 30. Now, this week is a special Torah reading. At the end, we take out a second Torah scroll. If the synagogue has two Torah scrolls, and we read Parsha Shkolim. The coming weeks, we're going to have 4 special additional readings. The first one is Shkolim. Shkolim means, you know what a shekel is?
Money.
Coins, yes. So this is these were the coins that they gave as a donation for use in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, and later on in the temple. And it was used also for census taking, but we get ready for that because the month of Adar is coming up, and that's when they used to do that. So we read, at least we don't do it today, but we, because we don't have a temple, among other reasons, but we read, and we take out an extra Torah scroll and we read. Usually, let me just back up just one step. Usually we have 7 aliyahs in the Torah portion, and the last aliyah, we repeat a little bit of the last aliyah, of the 7th aliyah, which becomes the maftir, and that leads into the Haftorah, the special Haftorah reading, which is from the Book of Prophets. But on a week like this, when we take out a second Torah scroll, we have 7 aliyahs where we complete the Torah portion, and then for the 8th aliyah, we go and we take a different Torah and we read the section about Shkolim, which is on the bottom of your, it's Exodus chapter 30, whatever, as you see there. And then we read the book from the Book of Prophets, not for the regular portion of Mishpatim, but rather about Shkolim as well. Is this clear? Okay. So Parshas Mishpatim has a wide range of laws that are discussed, most of them involving interpersonal relationships and damages. And really important to know is something we've mentioned in the past, the difference between the written Torah and the oral Torah. The written Torah is the Chumash, what we're learning, and that is like the base or the notes. And the oral Torah fills in the blanks. So we're going to have verses in the portion this week that are volumes of Talmud. What's the Talmud? The Talmud is the Mishnah and the Gemara, the oral Torah that was eventually written down. Again, if you're not sure what I'm saying, please stop to ask, okay? So, and I'm going to give you examples in the Parsha. So we'll have highlights in the Torah, and the details were given over orally to God, from God to Moshe, and eventually that was written down as the Mishnayos, the Mishnah, and eventually elucidated more in the Talmud, and now we have a lot of commentaries on that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? Now, Jewish law is all-encompassing, all aspects of life, and what's really important is to go to a Jewish court when a person has an issue. And the reason for that is because we follow Jewish law, and secular law doesn't necessarily always coincide with that. And it's besides being much less expensive, it's better to always go to a Jewish court. Luckily, in LA, we do have a Jewish court. But let's talk about an overview of the laws about the Torah, how it's broken down. And there's a wonderful book called Master Plan, which is I think Reb Samson Hirsch wrote a much more deeper and harder book to understand, Chorev, and I think they made it a little simpler to understand with the Master Plan. And I'm going to give you 5 groups of Jewish law that laws fit into. Group 1 is justice towards other people, which is basically the laws which form the basis of social justice, social legislation, I mean. Group 2 is justice toward the environment. Mitzvahs regulating our use and enjoyment of the environment. Group 3, love and concern for other people. Mitzvahs fostering enhanced awareness of the needs of other people. Group 4, enrichment of the environment. Mitzvahs which fill our environment with God-oriented activities. Group 5, the inner life. Mitzvahs addressed to our hearts and mind, expressing an intimate relationship with God. So I'm going to go through those 5 one more time quickly. Group 1, justice towards other people, laws which form the basis of social legislation. Group 2, justice towards the environment. Mitzvahs regulating our use and enjoyment of the environment. Group 3, love and concern for other people. Mitzvahs fostering enhanced awareness of the needs of other people. Group 4, enrichment of the environment. Mitzvahs which fill our environment with the God-oriented activities. And number 5 is the inner life. Mitzvahs address our hearts and mind, expressing an intimate relationship with God. So let's go through some examples of, we're not going to learn all of the laws in the Parsha, but we're going to go and touch a lot of them. Number 1, there is the laws of slavery, which pushes people's buttons because slavery sounds terrible. But interestingly enough, it's important to talk about slavery because in the world today, as we speak, there's 21 to 40 million people that are in forced labor. So it's very nice. We can stand on our high horse and say slavery is terrible. So it's better to do it right than not. So an example of slavery would be if a person steals and is caught and cannot pay back what he stole. So then he's sold as a slave. And the laws that we're talking about are basically all related to Jew. That makes it simpler. All right. So he's sold as a slave and he works for 6 years, and the 7th year he goes free. Now, the responsibility of taking care of the slave, the owner has some real responsibility here. Number 1, he can't just give him busy work and he can't give him lowly jobs. If the owner has 1 pillow, guess who gets it? The slave gets it. All right. He has to support the slave's wife and children. And there's a beautiful idea of being exposed to Jewish family life. And I'm going to finish this, and then I want to share some interesting insights with it. Part of the thing is that the slave exposed to Jewish life. He gets to live with the Jewish family. There's a great story with Rabbi Grossman. Rabbi Grossman is a wonderful rabbi, Rabbi Yitzchak Rabbi Grossman of Migdal Emek in Israel. He heard noises in his house and he wondered who it was. And he found out that a burglar was in his house. Now, Rabbi Grossman had tiptoed back and locked the door, but he didn't leave. He stayed in the house. And he didn't want the burglar to escape that easily. And he said to him, "Can I help you? What are you looking for?" And the burglar was all flustered. He said, "I'm going to give you a choice. I can call the police now. They'll be here in a few minutes and arrest you. Or I can offer you an alternative option. You can come here and spend Shabbos with us." Choice is yours. It begins Friday night till Saturday night. If you choose the latter, I'll forgoing the police, and I'll forget about the whole incident. He was like, shocked. So all I have to do is just be at your guest for Shabbos. That's all. I just want you to see what a Shabbos is like. And the date was set. The burglar was on his way. And he could have overlooked the whole deal, but he kept his word. And as religious too, he never before experienced Shabbos. And this was the first time he did. He went to shul. He was mesmerized by the prayers and the singing and the food and the Torah thoughts. And he went through a life transformation, became a religious person. So that's, the idea. All began, I just want you to see what a Shabbos is like. Now, going back to the slave person, if, in fact, he wants to stay longer than the 6 years, he likes it. He's happy. He wants to stay. We're not happy that he wants to stay, but we give him that option, and he has to be brought to the court, and his ear is pierced. And we tell him, you're the one who heard at Mount Sinai that you should be a good servant of God, and you heard at Mount Sinai not to steal, so you should be listening to your ears better. But we let him stay till the Yovel, the Jubilee year, the 50th year. He doesn't stay 50 years. There's a cycle of sabbatical years and Jubilee years. So whenever this Jubilee year comes up, the Yovel year comes up, he stays till then. What? And then he has to leave. Okay. The Jewish maidservant, we really don't want her to be sold. So she's not sold for theft, but sometimes there's a financial issue going on. We hate the idea. So the master or the son could either marry her and then she's treated like a regular wife. Yes.
You should have heard better that you should be a servant or slave to Hashem rather than a slave to a man.
Right.
That's why they put the hole in
and also that you should have heard better not to steal. She can be redeemed. That means for the years she didn't work yet, someone can pay. She goes out in the 7th year or the Yovel year, or if she becomes an adult, and she also has to be treated with respect as well. Now, there's a beautiful commentary that says the following, that why does it start with the slave story? So it says, Hashem is speaking about the Jewish people who he acquired as slaves. 6 years he shall serve. A man's active life in this world averages 60 years. In the 7th year he shall go free. After 70 years, he departs from the world and then becomes free of the obligation to fulfill the mitzvahs. If he came in by himself, if he spent his life without Torah and mitzvahs, he goes out by himself. He shall leave the world without this merit. If he's married, if however he occupied himself with Torah, so this is a metaphor for life. He occupies himself with Torah, which is termed a man's spouse, then his wife shall go with him. The Torah will accompany him even after death. It is said that after a man dies, neither gold nor silver nor pearls go along with him, but only the Torah and mitzvahs. If his master has given him a wife and she bears children, if he becomes a great and raised students who are considered like children, but his motives weren't so pure, then the wife and children shall be his masters and shall go out, then he will leave this world without as much merit. But if his slave shall say, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I occupy myself with Torah out of love for Hashem and raise disciples for the sake of heaven, I will not go free. Then he will never lose the Torah which he acquired even after death, and he will go from strength to strength in the world to come. And his master shall bring him close to God. He will merit perceiving the Shekhinah. He will bring him to the door. He will enter the gate of the righteous or the doorpost. Even in the Garden of Eden, he'll move from doorpost from one yeshiva to the next, and he shall serve Hashem forever at the time of the resurrection of the dead. So this is a beautiful analogy using the text of talking about practical slave stuff about it. We also have the law of an unintentional murder, going back to the Parsha, which is a person who unintentionally killed somebody. And unintentional is different than a total accident. Let me give you an example. If a guy has his brakes checked and they're working perfectly. They're working perfectly, and unfortunately, the brakes fail him, and he kills somebody. He doesn't have to go to the city of refuge. But if, however, the classic Talmudic example is if somebody has a axe that is that's the head is loose, and he's not careful, and he's chopping wood, and by mistake the blade goes flying and kills somebody inadvertently, then he goes to a city of refuge, which is a city in the land of Israel. There were 6 major ones, or he can go to the 42 cities of the Levium, and he has to stay there till the Kohen, Gadol, the high priest, passes away. So he's not killed for killing because it's inadvertent, but he does have to, his life is quite disrupted. But again, I want to be clear here that it's not if it's total accidental, it's where he has some liability, but his intention was not to kill. Okay? An intentional murder is killed, but again, only in the times of the temple when there was the court for it. But even then, it has to be where there were witnesses who warned him about what are the consequences of his choice, and B, witnesses who saw what he did. They had to warn him, to tell him, you're gonna kill him, it's murder, you're gonna be killed. And then famous verse, an eye for an eye. And this is one of the most important classic examples about where the written Torah is not read literally, because we have the oral Torah that explains. An eye for an eye does not mean that if someone knocks out somebody else's eye, that their eye gets taken out. Rather, it means financial payment. A person has to pay damages. And the damages encapsulate 5 things. How much the person's value has been diminished as a slave, okay? How much, what would we pay not to have this pain? Paying for the medical expenses, paying his doctor bills. And by the way, that parenthetically is a text proof to a person saying it's okay to go, the Torah tells us to go to the doctor. Because a person may say, no, I don't have to go to the doctor, I'm just going to believe in God. And there are people, non-Jews, who have that thing, who don't go to doctors. I have faith. No, the Torah says, Virapa, Yerapa, heal, you should go to a doctor and try to get healed. And one of the responsibilities is for the person who damages another person, intentionally or unintentionally, is that he have to pay damages. And that one of them is the doctor bill. Absence from work, how much time he lost, and the shame, the embarrassment. So it's again, the value of the person is diminished as a slave, the pain, medical expenses, the absence from work, and the shame. So we also have a case of someone who steals. And if a person steals and he's caught, then he has to pay double, whatever the value of the item is. If he can give back the item, then he pays the item plus the value of it. Or if he doesn't have the item anymore, he pays double. It's called kefil. Now, if he steals an ox or a sheep and he ritually slaughters it or he sells it, then he has to pay 4 or 5, 4 for the sheep and 5 for the ox. You make a pit in the public property, you are responsible and you have to pay damages. Now, a pit doesn't necessarily mean, it's a broad term, it's an example of making a hole in the property. But if you put a rock, and people trip over it, you're also responsible. Now, what if it's in your own private property? See, the law in America is a little different, but Jewish law says if it's in your property and people usually don't go in there, then what's your ox doing in my property? You shouldn't have been there in the first place. So you're not responsible then. You're responsible for damage that your animal does or your fire. You got to be careful. You have a little barbecue in your backyard and the spark flies into your neighbors and it burns down his barn. You're responsible. All right. The mitzvah of lending to others, and that's something you don't have to be wealthy for. You can do that mitzvah without being wealthy. Now, the borrower has some responsibilities. Number one, he cannot lend it out to somebody else. Okay? He has to return it on time. And he has responsibility for damage, except if it's during normal use. If it's normal use, then he's not responsible for the damage of it. Because it's, like I said, it's normal use. Another commandment in the Parsha is not to cheat or cause pain to a convert. And the Torah tells us, you were strangers too in the land. And there's not causing pain to a convert includes not reminding them of their past. The past is their past, so don't remind them of their past. I mentioned, I'm sorry?
You mean before they put it?
No, even after, don't remind them of that they are converts. Oh, remember before when you weren't Jewish? You don't remind them because that could be uncomfortable for them. Yeah. I may have mentioned this to some of you. I had a woman, Basi, many years ago. She was a Black woman who converted. And she came to me with a problem. She says, I'm in a kosher restaurant and people are constantly coming over to me and say, are you in a conversion program? Which conversion program? Like, did you finish? Did you not finish? She felt very uncomfortable. She wasn't your average looking Orthodox Jew. And so people would say, so I said, Basia, let me tell you something. This is what I want you to do. I want you to tell everybody, I'm willing to answer any of your questions. It just costs you $5 a pop. Because I can do that? Yes. If anyone questions you, tell them I said that you can. And okay, 2 days later, she comes to my office with $10. She wants to give a donation. She said, Rabbi, it worked like a charm. Anybody who came over to me and asked me, I said $5, and they realized, I'm sorry, you're right, it was an inappropriate question. Most people walked away. One person said, I know I shouldn't ask, but I have to ask, I have to know. And she played with him a little bit. She said, well, you could ask the question a little differently, you'd get more bang for your buck. And she asked 2 questions and he gave her $10 and she wanted to donate it to the jailing. I said, if that's the last $10 in the world for the shul, I'm not taking it. He asked you the questions, he paid you, you deserve it, it's yours, take it. So it was very funny. The importance of not harming a widow or an orphan. Now, really, there's a prohibition of harming anybody, of saying anything to anybody to make anybody feel badly. But a widow and an orphan, they're more sensitive and more defenseless, and therefore there's a special extra prohibition of not causing pain to an orphan or to a widow or an orphan. So Rabbi Sol Salanter, now there's a thing called hand matzahs, which we're going to talk about in our pre-Pesach class, which are done by hand, not by machine. And many times the people that are getting the jobs are people that are widows. They don't. So Rabbi Sol Salanter said, make sure, now the laws of making matzahs are very meticulous, and you have to finish the dough within 18 minutes. But if you're screaming at them that they're not working too slow, then you're ruining your matzahs. And Rabbi Sol Salanter would say, be very careful not to make sure to be nice to the person eating the dough and not pressure her not to violate the prohibition against doing anything wrong, because if you're gonna make her feel badly, you're doing a different prohibition. Rabbi Saul Salanto also became angry at the people of a particular town. They weren't paying tuition for young orphans who were roaming around. What can we do? We don't have the money to send them to school. So that's your responsibility. If you don't have the money, sell the Torah scroll, but you have to make sure the orphans are going to school. Rabbi Berlin brought home very expensive handmade glasses, and the members of the household enjoyed it for only a few days when the maid dropped it and broke it. His wife was very upset and scolded her for her clumsiness. And Rabbi Berlin intervened and said, "You have no right to shout at her and humiliate her. If you feel she should pay for it, take it to a rabbi for a halachic decision." Yes.
The idea of selling a Torah scroll,
Yes.
it's more important that the children have an education than
A Torah education than
At the same time, in today's world, it's more important that your children go to a Jewish day school.
Right, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about them going to yeshiva. I'm talking about signing them up for volleyball or soccer lessons.
To go there rather than, say, for example, for you to have a better car or a better house.
Right. You don't sell the Torah school for that. You sell the Torah school to get them to school, to Torah school. Right.
You should sell any valuable property that you have, because the priority is that the children should have the Jewish education.
That is correct. So he told his wife, if you think that she made a mistake and she's financially liable, take it to the court, take it to the rabbi. So she said, I'm going to do that. And Rav Yaakov Berlin got up to go to the court. And she says, I don't need you to come. I don't need any help. I know what to say. He says, I'm not going for you. I'm going for her. She doesn't have anybody representing her. She's an orphan and doesn't have anyone to come to her defense. So I'm going on her defense. They must have had a good relationship that he could do that, you know. There's another idea of lending money, but without charging interest. The concept of an interest-free loan. Very important idea. And there's some beautiful things that have come out of this idea. There's a concept called a gemach. Gemach is an acronym stands for Gemilus Chasadim, acts of loving kindness. I was a few months ago in Lakewood, New Jersey, and I went to a place that someone set up. I cannot begin to, I was in awe of this place, that someone funded a place for people to loan out free of charge tablecloths and vases and decorative things to be able to make a nice, you know, a bar mitzvah or a sheva brachas or an engagement party. And it's a storefront set up beautifully with different colored and designs of tablecloths, so they can be themed. You know, the ladies, when they do it, they like to do it beautifully. And I was like in awe, and people are walking in with carriages and wagons and taking things out and borrowing them and returning them. And it just, you know, like I said, it's like you're walking into a department store, but there's no money being exchanged. It's a free loan society. It was just, you know, such a beautiful, beautiful thing that someone funded and is paying, you know, money to rent the place and to maintain it and to clean it. Really exceptionally special. So there's a lot of gemachs. Gemach again stands for free loans. So there are free loan societies of money when a person's financially in a bad situation, that they have they can lend money, and pay it back over time. Sometimes you have to get co-signers. That would be appropriate. But there are many things. I mean, there's people, and your imagination is the limit of what things people have done. For example, there is here in Los Angeles, there is a wedding gown gemach, which means wedding gowns are very expensive, and you're talking about thousands of dollars. But when people get married and they're finished with the gown, they give it to the gemach, and if it fits your style and your taste and close to your size, it can be altered. It's a very beautiful, beautiful thing. Community has that. I know somebody who has a mezuzah gemach. And the mezuzah gemach sounds interesting. Why a person have a mezuzah? Because especially in California, a lot of doorways, and at one shot you have to spend, hundreds of dollars to buy mezuzahs. Sometimes it could be expensive. A person doesn't have the money. So here he loans you the mezuzahs, and then you slowly buy your own, and you return the other ones. So there's a gemach. Now, if you ever go to Jerusalem, you have to look in the phone book under gemach. You'll be blown away. It's pages of free loan society things for all different kinds of things. One of the free loan societies they have is a pacifier. Now, why would you need a pacifier? What happens if in the middle of the night the kid wakes up and you can't find the pacifier, and he's So you go to the free loan gemach, that if there was one in your neighborhood, you get the pacifier, you plug the kid, put the kid back to sleep, and the next day you buy a new one and replace it. They have mother's milk for those who maybe can't nurse for whatever reason, but they want to use mother's milk. There's just so many beautiful, beautiful gemachs in society now that is just very, very special. Now, when you lend something to somebody, you, as the lender, cannot pressure the person to pay back if he doesn't have the money. The borrower has responsibility that if he doesn't see a possible way of paying back, then he shouldn't borrow in the first place, and he has to work hard to pay it back. There's a joke that's told about this guy who didn't have money, and he would borrow from one free loan society, and then he didn't have money to pay back. So he went to another free loan society and borrowed from there to pay back the first one. And then when he didn't have money to pay back the second one, he borrowed from the third one. And he kept on going round robin. He got older and he called a meeting with all of the free loan societies. He says, look, I'm getting old. I'm getting tired of going to each place. You guys just pay each other and keep me out of it. So we also have a prohibition in the Parsha of listening to Lashon Hara, which is a longer discussion, which we'll have probably, God willing, in a few months. But there's very important laws about not speaking ill about other people. Now, this is very tricky because you can ask information about another person. For example, you heard about a good guy or a good gal, and thinking about getting married. You're allowed to ask information, and the person's allowed to say, if you know firsthand information that is negative, if it's relevant, you can say it. But at the same time, just out of curiosity, you can't just find out about the other person. So these are very, very specific laws. And I want to emphasize something. Lashon Hara, speaking ill about others, includes even if it's true. If it's not true, then that's another prohibition called Motzi Shemra. Then you stop defaming another person. But even if it's true, if it's not, you're looking for hire somebody. Is it a good person or not? You want to go into partnership with somebody. You're allowed to give concrete, clear information that you know about. And by the way, I had once a woman call me about a certain match that was going on, And I said, did you say to that person about X, Y, and Z, problem X, Y, and Z? And I said, oh, I couldn't do that because then the match wouldn't happen. So I said, oh, great. You don't say the problem, and then you want the rabbis to pick up the pieces after it gets revealed. That's not the way to go. This is a relevant piece of information. The other side needs to know that. They can decide that they're okay with that. That's fine. That's their choice. But so a medical condition is a very, very excellent question. So usually the halacha is as follows. My recommendation, it's not only mine, but what rabbis have recommended is that the person who has the medical condition is required to say something, but not from the get-go. Why is it? Oh. Yes, but yes. Yes. So now you're qualifying your okay, that's correct. It depends on the illness. That is correct. But the idea is that sometimes if you lay everything out up in front, the person's going to say, why should I bother with this? But a person met the person once or twice and they know who they are, and now it's going to be in the context of what the person's like, then the person can decide, is this for me or not? You understand? I'm sorry?
What happens if it's an arrangement of marriage and there is real reasons to know that this girl cannot be working?
A person that the woman can't have children. So again, that's something that should have been said before. But again, that's ideally, it should be the person themselves who are saying that.
Oh, they should come forward.
The person should come forward and say, look, I want you to know that I'm not capable of having children, something like that. Yeah. Ideally, it should come from the person. Ideally, because first of all, hopefully the person knows the condition best, and the person can refer them maybe to their physician, to say what the story is, how serious it is, what are involved. Ideally, that should be. Now, if the person is not going to come forward, that's a problem. So then it gets technical, depending how serious it is. Is it something to say, something not to say? So it depends on what the illness is, what the problem is. You know what I'm saying? So it's I have to Hashem I have this rule: when Hashem pops a story into my head during the class, it means that I'm supposed to share it. So I had a woman who was coming to the jail many, many, many years ago, and a guy. She was growing in her Judaism. He was not religious. He just walked in and he had heard about it and he wanted to date her. So he came to me and he said, I understand you have this woman in your classes, in your synagogue, and I'm interested in dating her. I said, look, let me find out about you a little bit and I'll speak to her and see if she's interested. So she was a very funny lady. So I got his information, and I called her up and I said, look, I got information about this guy. He seems like a nice guy. I just met him once. What's he do for a living? He's an actor. How can I date him? He could be an axe murderer. I said, shh, I don't know if he's an axe murderer. I'm just don't know. But he seems like a nice person. He's interested in meeting you. Would you like to meet? You can meet him in a public spot. It's up to you. I'm not pushing it. I can't recommend him. I just met him once. Said, I'll think about it. Okay. So he calls me up and says, what did she say? She's just thinking about it. Says, okay. He says, well, tell her that I'm on the Saturday night movie of the week. I'm acting. He's a real actor. I said, oh, okay. What's your role there? Oh, I'm an assassin. I said, I don't know. It might not be a good first impression. I don't know if I'll mention that. And then I see he gives me a list of all of his parts of the movies he played. And one of them was a movie that I knew was about the Israeli operation. I forgot the one of Entebbe. I forgot the raid on it. What? Yeah, I forgot. There's an English word for the name of it. Operation. I don't know what it was called. Operation Entebbe, maybe. I don't remember what it was called. So I said, "Oh, what did you pay there?" I said, "Oh, there, I was Carlos, the master terrorist." I am not going to share this. I don't think they ended up going out, but she was worried he was an axe murderer, and his roles are all this. So I don't know. I didn't want to push it too hard. I can't. You couldn't make the stuff up. Go ahead, Letty. Yes.
Way possible. Because it's blunt and just like put it out there, or you can also kind of just listen more.
Well, there's a few things. There, Letty. First of all, the information has to be 100% accurate. It can't be based upon hearsay. That's number one. Number two, it depends what the issue is. Is it relevant? In sixth grade, he gave the teacher a flat tire. That's not relevant. You know what I'm saying? Has to be relevant for today. Thirdly, yes, tact is a good idea. And fourthly, you're not allowed to embellish. It has to be facts, cold, hard facts. You know what I'm saying? So that's, go ahead.
Do these prohibitions from Torah also apply amongst or between like a non-Jew and a Jew, or is it just between Jews? And this question has come up actually in discussions that I've had with people, and there seems to be confusion as to whether or not.
It depends on the circumstances of it, but there is a prohibition, generally not. Now, obviously, sometimes it's relevant. The guy's a mass murderer. Yeah, he really is an axe murderer. Yes, I don't care if he's a Jew or non-Jew. You want people to avoid him. So, but there is a prohibition of Lashon Hara, fine-tuned a little bit, but yes, there is a prohibition of speaking about non-Jews in a negative way as well. And interestingly enough, that even if you hear something negative, you're not allowed to believe it's true. You can prevent the possibility of him or her causing you damage. You don't have to make believe that it's, oh, I'm not believing it at all. Maybe it's true, but you can't take it on as a fact. And therefore you can do preventive measures to protect yourself. The beautiful term, that halachic term is chabdeyu v'chajdeyu. Honor him, but be cautious, but be careful. So that's a beautiful combination approach to it. Another mitzvah in the Parsha is Hashavas Aveda, returning the lost object. And the Gemara in Tainus has a beautiful story about Reb Chanina ben Doisa, that Reb Chanina ben Doisa's wife found chickens outside the door. A person had gone to sleep and left some chickens there, and she took them in, and they took care of them. The chickens multiplied. There was too much of a burden to keep them, so they sold the chicken and he bought goats with the proceeds. A while later, the man who lost the chicken passed up Chanina ben Doisa's house and said, "Hey, this is the place. I left some chickens. Did you by any chance find chickens?" And they asked him, "Can you give me a simon? Give you a sign?" Because a person who just claimed he lost something has to prove that it's actually his by some unique sign that he knows that is. Yes, it was wrapped in a red, my chickens were wrapped in a red thing with my initials on it. Yeah, okay. Come get your chickens. They take them to the yard, and the goats come marching out. I said, chickens, not goats. I said, no, but we sold the chickens that multiplied and you have goats. They were easy to take care of. So now you have the goats. So it's just a beautiful, beautiful story. Now, just parenthetically, halachically, you could charge the person for the upkeep and the maintenance of it, not a fee for your services, but for the cost of the feed, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a beautiful mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda. A very powerful statement, midavar sheket tirchak, distance yourself from a lie. Distance yourself from a lie. Be careful to be honest. And Reb Shimon ben Shetach was a great scholar, and he asked the students to buy him a donkey, and he gave them the money for that. And on the way back, they noticed that there was a diamond under the saddle of it. And they said, Rebbe, you're rich. You don't have to worry about working. You can just teach us Torah. And he said, I bought a donkey. I didn't buy the diamond. Return the diamond. But, doesn't make a difference. And the non-Jew said, praise is the God of Reb Shimon ben Shatta. We have the prohibition of not mixing milk and meat together. And there are actually 3 prohibitions: not eating it, not cooking it, or not deriving benefit. How do you derive benefit? Dog food sometimes is a problem because it sometimes has milk and meat. If you buy dog food with milk and meat for your dog, can't have it because you're deriving benefit because your dog is eating it. Yeah. Even though the dog's not Jewish, doesn't make a difference. Go ahead, yes. Yeah, it's a problem. It's a problem selling. Yeah, sure. You can't because you can't derive benefit from it. It was very funny. I have a friend of mine from many, many years ago who was becoming more religious, and he was eating non-kosher, and he was in a restaurant, and his friends asked him, would you like a milkshake? And he was not keeping kosher yet. He says, no, because I don't want to mix milk and meat. And unbeknownst to his realization, he was in the middle of eating a cheeseburger. And his friends all realized it. And he said, no, okay, have a milkshake. No, I don't want to mix milk and meat. You know, again, he was early in the stages of his journey. And they we'll pay for the milkshake. Guys, please, don't give me a hard time. I don't want to mix some meat. And he's munching on it. Then eventually they say, you're eating a cheeseburger. So he got set up with that. Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Weinrib from the OU wrote a very beautiful article, and I'd like to share just a few snippets of it. We'll conclude with that, and then we'll take any questions. This was not an obvious choice back in the 1940s, for few parents chose the day school option. Instead, many of their friends advised them against depriving me of a public school education and the cost of tuition, which was a great strain on my father's meager income. But I remember my mother insisting that she wanted to teach me responsibility, and her belief was that I would learn that best at a Jewish school. Looking back on my early school years, I certainly cannot recall any lessons specifically devoted to responsibility. Learning the Hebrew alphabet and then going on to study the fascinating stories of Genesis were certainly interesting and exciting to me, but in those early grades, concept of responsibility never came up, at least not explicitly. In the school I attended, Talmud study began in the 5th or 6th grade. It was then that I first heard the word responsibility in the classroom and began to learn what it really meant. We were introduced to Talmud study with selected passages in the tractates of Bava Kama and Bava Metzia. The passages that we'll study were almost exclusively based upon verses found in this week's Torah portion, Parshat Mishpatim. And the single dominant theme of the week portion is unarguably responsibility. I look back at my first exposure to Talmud and to the Torah portion and study through its lenses, and remember the teacher admonishing a person is responsible for all of his actions, deliberate or unintentional, peaceful or accidental, awake or asleep. So a direct quote from the Talmud, but emphatically conveyed to us that it was a formula for life. Person responsible for his animals and responsibility for my possessions that cause damage. We're responsible not only to compensate those whom we have harmed for the damages they suffered, but also responsible to compensate them for lost employment and for the healthcare costs that were incurred by whatever harm we caused them. What a revelation for a 10-year-old boy. How many 10-year-olds in the other educational settings were exposed to these high ethical standards? Certainly not the boys in the park with whom I played stickball, whose parents had not opted for a day school education for them. Even today, many criticize the curriculum of the type of education I experienced. They point to the many verses in this week's source that speak of an ox goring another, questions the contemporary relevance of such arcane legalities. But when I study about my responsibility for my oxen and the consequences which applies if my ox gored you or your slave or your ox, I was living in Brooklyn, where I certainly had not oxen nor slaves, but I did not at all recall being troubled by that, nor were any of my classmates. Rather, we easily internalized the underlying principles of these passages. We understood that the laws of oxen were relevant even for us Brooklyn Dodger fans. We got the message. Each of us is responsible for the well-being of the other, be it he a free man or the slave of old. we're not only to take care of what we avoid harming another, but we are to take care of our possessions so that they, be they farm animals, pets, or mislaid baseball bats, do not endanger those around us. So the article goes on, but I'll leave it at that. You get the message. The idea was that even though it seemed like the topics were not relevant, they were very, very relevant because it taught some important lessons. Okay. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Yes.
Yes. Can I?
1 second. What? You didn't get what?
The metaphor about, the master gives his wife and how it related to the Torah.
Remind me that I'll
You said it.
I know. Remind me, and maybe I'll make a copy of it. Okay. Yes.
What is the prohibition about mixing meat and fish, and where does that come from?
Okay, it's not the same prohibition. It's just that they're different types of species, so we don't eat them together. And we should, and that's actually some people after fish. That's why they make a l'chaim, because to separate between the fish and the meat. So that partially it has to do with where their different status. The fish is from the water, this is from the earth. Also, we don't want to make people mix up between fish and between meat and milk, and they should look at it as fish is sometimes you can have something that's fish that's looks like fish and it's meat, or it looks like meat and it's fish. So we want to keep them separate.
But you could use the same utensils.
The custom is that's why we have different utensils for it. Again, it's not the same severity as milk and meat, but we do use separate utensils for fish and meat. So if you're by a kiddush and there's a herring, use one fork for that and different one for the cholent. Okay.
I'll eat neither.
You'll eat neither herring.
I would eat neither. My father, no.
You better go to the doctor, check out why you're not eating herring. Letty, you had a question? Yeah, we don't eat fish and meat together. That's right. Yeah. Yes, that's correct. Yeah. And there's some Kabbalistic aspect to it, but that's it. Yes. Question.
A little different. When you're doing the motzi, do you when you're taking the bread? Some people they cut a little piece off first, and others,
you don't cut a piece off. You just make a cut in it so that it'll cut easier later. You don't cut off a piece.
And so when you're making the cut, you just make it where you would normally do it. Why are you making a little cut first before you say?
To make it easier to cut, so there's not a big space between the blessing and actual eating of the piece.
Oh.
Especially if it's like really hard, so like you cut it out, so this way you don't have to go.
Oh. It said they want to make a little cut of piece because that's for the Satan to take.
All right, now you're Kabbalisting me. I don't know. No, you're not taking off a piece of it. Any other questions or thoughts? All right. Anybody else? Comments, thoughts? Going once, going twice. Have a wonderful week. Take care. I unfortunately I have a brother that's not well. Yeah, 1 second. I'll take your question in a second. I have a brother that's not well, unfortunately. So I may not be here next week. We'll send out an email about it. I may have to go visit. I want to go visit him. Yeah, question, Sue?
Yeah, well, first of all, Fushalema, and he should only hear good news.
Right.
And the second, Malka, what are the fishes that you said there's certain fishes what are the certain fishes that you have to do it on?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Malka said, what fish
No, we don't eat fish and milk together. Kosher fish and kosher meat, we don't eat together. We use separate utensils for that. That's what we separate between kosher fish and kosher meat.
But fish is carved.
I know, but we don't eat fish together with meat. We just separate between them. That's why we have different forks on Shabbos and different plates. Mm-hmm. That's correct.
But there's not.
It's not the same prohibition as milk and meat. Any other questions or thoughts?
How do you find more information on it?
You're lying.
you very much. I know that. That's why I'm asking the question to learn.
Okay,
All right,
right.
thank you.
everybody have a great week. Take care. Connie
Rabbi?
and Malka. Yes, David.
Yeah, I'd like to say refuah shlema for your brother. What's his name?
Thank you. Shalom Yaakov ben Chana.
Shalom Yaakov ben Hana should have a complete healing. Refuah shlema.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi Czapnik.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you,
righty.
Rabbi.
Take care. Amen. Take care. Have a great week, everybody. So you'll check the emails if we'll
Okay.
let you know if this class is on or not. Take care.
All
Thank
right,
you, Rob.
Koto.
You're welcome.